Morning, first of all.
Morning to you too.
Yeah, thank you for according us with your time. It's a huge sacrifice. We really appreciate you for it. So
Welcome.
this is part of our, actually this is our exam for one of the units that we're doing in school for 4 years. And we are supposed to interview a media personality. And we thought about you because you are among the leading in Kenya, and of course get so many viewers, and also you have a very good brand. And we thought that would be the best person for us to interview this morning. Yeah, so earlier I had sent you the questions. Like us just to start, just look at them. So the first question that I sent you was, how did you find yourself in the media industry?
Okay, there's a long version and the short version. I'll try and do the short version. Basically, I was challenged by people who saw me moderating events, especially in church, to consider a career in either public speaking, debate, or media, because public speaking and debate aren't really careers in a sense, or haven't been very well developed in this country. So I remember when I was doing my undergraduate in a completely different course subject, I would moderate in church on Sundays. And I remember one pastor particularly really telling me that he thinks I am doing the wrong course and I should study media. My journey to media has been very different from the journey of many others. But the truth of the matter is many journalists around the world also had peculiar media paths. I know of journalists who are lawyers. I have a very good friend who's a journalist who's a doctor by profession. Others who did political science, for example. So journalism is one of those very unique careers, and I know sometimes it doesn't sit well with journalism students, and I totally understand that. But basically, for me, it was a question of I got into journalism through a different route. I was actually at some point an actor for a production. After that, I got to know about an audition at Citizen TV. I went for the first audition. I wasn't successful, and this was on the back of having done many auditions. When you go for a lot of auditions, you get to know who the players are in the space, and you are in WhatsApp groups or contacts who will tell you when there's an audition here and an audition there. I remember during that year, I must have done easily 2 auditions every month in different places. In a nutshell, I was on a journey to discover my life purpose, if I can put it that way. So finally, I got this audition to be in this acting in this production at Citizen TV. Luckily, I made it to the final round and I was selected. After I finished with that production, I was informed about another audition at Citizen to host a TV show. I went for the audition. I was not successful, but the producer kept my number, and she called me for the next audition about a month later. And it was for a show called Zinduka. And after I did Zinduka, that is how sort of my journey into media started. So that is the short version of the story. But basically, mine is a question of having gotten into the field through the acting sort of profession. And I'm not alone. I think Ferdinand Omondi of the BBC, is it Terry Anchebet, I think, as well. Many others at some point in our lives acted before we got into sort of mainstream journalism.
Wow, hey, that's very interesting. I actually didn't know about that. And okay, so the course that you studied, do you find any like key things in the course that you studied that have helped you maneuver in this career of media and journalism?
Well, so right now I'm actually in the process of completing my master's in communication, actually at Daystar University. So I don't know if that's the one you're referring to, but in my undergrad, my undergrad was in computer science. But let me tell you the funny thing. So computer science, one could say, at that point had very little to do with journalism. But right now, it's a completely different matter. The cutting edge of journalism right now is data journalism. And about a month or 2 ago, someone sent me some job adverts for NGOs and sort of media organizations that are looking to hire. And a lot of the qualifications revolved around data journalism, some sort of mathematics, understanding and how to use certain softwares. And it occurred to me that these people were looking more for computer scientists to work in data journalism than actual journalists themselves. So I would challenge anyone looking to getting into the journalism field right now, that in addition to studying your mass comm, and I certainly hope that your school offers you data journalism within that mass comm degree, that maybe you should even do a 6-month course on data journalism. Because to be quite honest, that is where the jobs are. And I remember I messaged the person who sent me those job adverts, and I asked them, these guys are looking for computer scientists and actuarial scientists. They're no longer looking for how well you can write a script or how well you can face a camera and do a piece to camera, or how well you speak. They're looking for data analysis skills. And that's where journalism is. So to answer your question, the skills that I gained from my computer science degree, how many years ago, maybe 13, 14 years ago, were not relevant then. But right now, they are very, very relevant. And I would say anybody looking for a journalism job in the next 1 to 5 years without having to struggle too much will have to figure out how to get some data journalism skills under their belt, because that is where the jobs are at the moment. That is where I am seeing a lot of job adverts at this current time.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I was just thinking, like, before you became a senior anchor at Citizen TV, maybe what were the previous roles that you had in the media?
Well, so I've primarily worked at Citizen TV for my 11 years of journalism. In terms of previous roles, I was the host of a show called Zinduka. It was a youth entrepreneurship show that aired once a week on Citizen TV. I co-hosted it with a lady called Diana Libiso for about 8 months. Thereafter, I was the sports correspondent for the Power Breakfast show. I provided all the sports highlights and updates to the team that included Jimmy Gathu, Kobe Kihara, Mutegi Njau, Johnson Mwakazi, Samantha Awins Podek. So I was the sports guy on the show. That lasted for about a year and a half. Thereafter, I was part of the sports desk under Torome Tirike and Michael Kinyi. I worked together with Bernard Ndong, Maureen Mwende, Geoffrey Washira, and I was there. That was my longest stint. I think I did about 6 years. It was a very fulfilling time there. I anchored sports news, but I also did a lot of sports features. And I won the CNN Award and the Mo Amin Award. And I got nominated for the Media Council Award 3 times while at the sports desk. So it was a very rewarding time, and I really appreciate that. Thereafter, I was the host of a show called Citizen Extra. It was a mid-morning political show. I did that for about, did we do 6 months or so? 6-7 months. And then I started hosting a primetime show. First, it was Friday night. I was a host with Jackie Maribe. We did about maybe 4 months. And then I went to London for the BBC Komla Dumor Award, spent 4 months there. There's been a lot. And then I came back, did Monday Report with Trevor Mbija and Mashrima Kapombe for about a year. And then Newsnight came calling, and that's where I've been ever since.
And speaking of awards, the recent one that you won on the BBC, how was the experience for you?
Oh, well, I don't think it's recent anymore. You know, it's pre-corona. Anything pre-corona, I don't think you can call it recent. But it was a great experience. It was, I think I learned, there are things that I learned intentionally, and there are things that I learned unintentionally. What I mean by that is what the course endeavored to teach us was to make us, or to make me, and maybe all the others who've been through the program, better journalists by exposing us to sort of the latest trends in journalism for TV, radio, digital. Got to dabble a little bit in podcasting and creating digital stories and the research process and so forth. So those are the things that were sort of intentional in terms of expectations. And I believe I did my best to sort of pick up on that. And I've never forgotten a lot of what I learned there. But some of the unintentional consequences of that course was what it instills in you. One was, I think I fell in love with storytelling once again. You know, sometimes when you start anchoring news, you believe that is the sort of the epitome. But anchoring news is actually, to be quite honest, not a very big deal if you imagine that you can just pick anyone who can speak clearly and can do that TV look, and they can be a news anchor. But storytelling, now that is complex, and that is where again I believe the jobs are, and so, especially if you can storytell with data. So for me, my experience at the BBC taught me that I must sharpen my storytelling skills. That is where the long-term growth is. But also, it was a very it gives your career a boost. You know, when you've gone through a program like that, very little is impossible to you in your mind. Sometimes it's about your mental space. If you believe anything is impossible, anything is possible and nothing is impossible, I believe you can go further. And I think I interacting with people like Stephen Saka, the host of Hard Talk, Ross Atkins, the host of what is his show? Outside Source, and even the Focus on Africa team, Sophie Kenya, Peter Okoche, and others. There's just a way your confidence is boosted, and you feel you can take on the world. Yeah, even as an investigative journalist, I felt challenged to do even bolder stories. So the unintentional consequences was a love for storytelling once again, and a greater confidence that I am as capable as anyone else out there. So overall, a great experience that I would recommend. If anyone gets a chance to do, they should.
For a moment, a lot of Kenyans are concerned that you'll be moving on to BBC.
Well, I don't think they have any reason to be concerned. I think, if you look at it that way, if I'd stayed there, there'd be another job here for somebody else, one way or the other. But also, maybe it was good. It was good for me to come back and sort of try and figure out how to translate what I'd learned back home. And I think I've been able to, think through that as in my role when I came back, both for Newsnight, but also more for the special projects role that I have now as a special projects editor. A lot of what I learned there, I am in the process of implementing now. And so that is a work in progress, if I can put it that way.
You mentioned a special projects editor. So I'm wondering what kind of stories are deemed as special projects?
That's a good question. Any story that you do on a day-to-day basis, like today, JSC is interviewing Philip Burgor for the post of Chief Justice. That's not a special project. That's a daily story. You wake up, you listen to what they're saying, and then at the end of the day, you tell the viewers what was said, for those who missed it. Special projects are where you take news and you add value significantly, okay, beyond day-to-day news. So it could be a health story where you go beyond the corona headlines and tell deeper, sort of add deeper context to it. It could be an investigative story where people are still wondering who brought in the Sputnik vaccine, and you go the extra mile, and rather than reporting that so and so and so and so and so and so, you tell the audience who brought it in, how many doses, how much they paid, what the plan was, that sort of thing. Special projects is also planning for future events. We know that a Chief Justice will be sworn in the next month or two. So as part of special projects, you begin to think through what will that coverage look like, how to prepare for it. You know that there are public holidays coming up. How do you prepare for that? You know that there's an election next year and by-election and maybe a referendum this year. You're part of the team that is thinking through ideas for that. So special projects is anything that goes beyond day-to-day coverage and requires significant addition of a value to a news item, news product, or a story. Yes, I hope I've been as clear as possible.
Yes, you have. So there's this story that I'm very interested that I remember we just briefly talked about it. There's a story that you did, the expose on Masai Mara University. I don't know, how was your experience so far in doing that story?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's been a little over a year, and I think we're going on a year, 6 months since Mara Heist first aired. Mara Heist was very interesting. The boldest story that I've done yet. We did it with Asha Mwilu, who then was the special projects editor. And then we also were with Jamila Mohammed, who is the managing editor Kiswahili, and a cameraman called Nelson, who did a great job. For me, the Mara Heist was a mix of exhilarating, at some point a bit nerve-wracking. You're stepping on toes. People won't be happy. So it was, it was crazy. And then you also have these whistleblowers who are so bold and so ready to bear the facts. They don't care. They are ready to appear on camera. That rarely happens in Kenya, where a society where people are willing to leak information, but they don't want to be seen. Mara Heist was an amazing experience. I'll be honest with you. And even though we thought it was just a story about a university, the way the public responded. I've been in journalism for 11 years. I've been part of the coverage of some good stories, but I have never gotten feedback like that. That was, overwhelming. I think it was just Kenya has had many investigative stories done, but I think what set Mara Heist apart was that there were very few loose ends. People were not left thinking, "Ujama ametuzungusha hajatuam." We were able to pinpoint where the weaknesses are at the institution. We were able to raise questions about those in charge of those departments. We were able to show proof of why we are naming so and so. If we are naming Mark Mchuma, we are able to prove why we are naming Mark Mchuma. We had whistleblowers who are within the system that were willing to go on camera, and that's usually a problem. And we had whistleblowers who are ready to go to the DCI at the end of it all. It doesn't get any better. And we had documentation, pages upon pages of bank statements and letters. And then we even went a step further and took that documentation to Transparency International. We also engaged an external accountant. So because we are not accountants, but we had a lot of documentation that we needed to get assistance on. And when we took it to our external accountant and when we took it to Transparency International, both of them gave the same feedback, that there are forensic questions around the way the accounts were handled. And when we went to the DCI, after a long investigation of about a year, they came to the same conclusion. And so there are about 5 or 6 suspects in court over the same matter. And so Mara Heist was our way of trying to play a part in the fight against corruption in this country. And hopefully it showed Kenyans how money is stolen, where money is stolen, why it is stolen, but also what brave whistleblowers can do to stop this sort of behavior.
Is there a moment in your life when you're doing the Mara Heist that you felt like, your life is in danger, you felt threatened or etc.? You're not fearful when you did the story.
People ask me whether I still get fearful when I'm going on air to do live coverage or something. The fear never goes away. Whether it is doing a story, whether it is going on the news and you feel nervous, it never goes away. But you manage it because it's for a greater good. We need more people, because of where our country is, we need more people willing to stand up against corruption and things like that. And so I have reached a stage in my life where I say that because I have access to resources like TV and I have a voice, that when I have proof of something that is going wrong, I will not be afraid to stand for it. Because if every journalist is afraid to stand up for the truth, then where are we going to end up? And so is there fear? Yes. Are there times when we employ certain measures to try and keep safe? Yes. I'll tell you, in the run-up to the airing of Mara Heist, we went undercover quite a bit. If you we used different modes of transportation. We almost changed our phone lines and things like that. So yes, I use some apps so that you can track me and stuff like that. Yeah. So we do those things. We do till today. And however, we do it because we believe there is a greater good.
And again, I think Mara Hess is one of the few successful stories that we've had on TV, especially because so many times we've had journalists who do stories and then we really do not see the end result. But I'm grateful because your team managed to even show us that the people are arrested and actually the case is in court and it's continuing. So I can say big up to that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, on another story, well, this is a bit not really a serious one. I'm just curious. Do you do the articulation exercises before you go on air to check your vocals, voice, etc.?
Well, I think reading news is not like singing. Singing, I think, is where you do those things. Obviously, you can take maybe a warm drink if it's been a cold day, just to make sure your airways are clear. But generally, no. Maybe when you do the sound check, when you've been mic'd, you can do some exercises just to open up your airways as they check your sound levels. But no, I don't think reading news technically should be like talking to the audience. You should get the feeling that this guy is talking to you, not reading. I know it's not that way, but we are on a quest to make reading news as natural as possible, so that the way I'm talking to you now is the way I should read news. Not that suddenly my voice changes by 100% and I'm a completely different individual. So no, I don't particularly have a routine. I have a routine of how to get my mind in the right space before I get on air. But I kind of feel like your voice, we do, like, I'll do news in the evening. I've been talking the whole day. I've been, reading other stories the whole day. So usually my voice is pretty warmed up by the time you're getting on. In the morning, sometimes, it can be a bit of a slow start. You might ask for some hot water just to jumpstart the voice before you get started. Yeah. But there isn't any, I haven't really heard of any particular protocol where you must do a 30-minute warm-up before you get on air.
All right, thanks. And how did you discover your anchor voice?
Oh, anchor voice. Oh, I could say I partly picked up sort of how I read news from those who the veterans in our time. I liked the reading style of, I'll tell you who I admire in terms of how they just do their thing. Tom Mboya was always a very natural news reader. You never felt like he was reading news. You always felt like he was just talking to you. That's one guy, and he had a very natural grace to him. Whenever I was in studio with Tom Mboya, I always felt very at ease, very relaxed. So that's one guy. In terms of doing interviews, I liked Jimmy Gathu's style. Jimmy Gathu, again, whenever you were with him in studio, his energy just sort of welcomed you and you felt relaxed. So I could say in my formative years of journalism, those two served as a great inspiration, because I was in studio with them at the same time and I learned from them. And then you watch a little bit of what's happening globally, I would say. Maybe you like the reading style of you like the interviewing style of the late Larry King, or interviewing style of Steven Saka, or the news reading style of someone like, I don't know. I can't think of anyone right now off the top of my head. Yeah, so you benchmark locally with people you have access to, and then globally as well. And then your voice then becomes a mixture of who you are, but a little bit of what you see from those whom you admire. You emulate, obviously, what you admire.
And at what stage would you say that, or maybe what stage will you maybe reach, and then you tell yourself, I think I'm almost at the peak, or maybe I've reached the peak of my career?
Yeah, good question. I've never actually thought of that. because I still feel that there's so much more that I can do, want to do. So I have never actually thought of when I would then get to a point where I say, I have done enough in this space. I do believe in continuous growth. That's one, so that I never get to a point where I feel like I've stagnated. And I think growth is good because it means you leave space. You're not staying in the same space. You leave space for others to come in. But that's interesting. If I ever left the profession, it might be a series of factors like, journalism is very intensive, and some people make the decision to step away for family considerations or things like, so maybe those are some of the factors I'll take where I say, you know what, even if I'm not at the top, let me go and do something different so I can spend more time with my family. For example, I know of journalists who've done that, because journalism is, my friend, it is intensive, but being at the top would be, maybe if I host a global show, maybe after that I then would say that's enough. Zain Verjee read news at CNN for 10, 11, 12 years maybe. And one day I think she woke up, and I interviewed Zain Verjee just when the lockdown has started. And I think one day she woke up and did she tell me, and I forgive me if I paraphrased that, Zain, if you ever watch this, I apologize if I've taken your words out of context. She did not see herself doing the same thing again next year, So she had been reading news, she had interviewed the big boys, she'd done this and that and that. And I think she felt that her path of growth at CNN had either come to an end, or even if it had not, she did not feel excited about being in the same position next year. Maybe she felt that she had nothing to look forward to. And so she jumped out into this world of entrepreneurship. Maybe when I get there, then I will say, I've done enough, and I'm going to jump to another world and try out something different. But for now, I still think there's room for growth. I still think I've come a long way, but I still feel there's still some way to go. And so maybe if you ask me in another 3 years, ask me in 3 years that question, I might have a more definitive answer for you.
Thank you so much. So I'm thinking about maybe what are the challenges that you've had, maybe that you're facing, both internally, like in the newsroom and in the whole media setup, and also out of the media setup. That is in reference to a broadcast journalist right now.
Oh, the challenges are, I mean, I think everyone faces challenges no matter what profession you are in, but as journalists, we are challenged by the growth of social media, which has become both an ally and a competitor. Social media is a very great source to pick up story ideas. It also allows you to get immediate feedback from your audience, which is important. In the past, apart from, days of KBC, people used to write letters to KBC if they liked a story, if they didn't. By the time a letter gets to you, that's like maybe, I don't know how many days. But nowadays, Citizen TV had an exclusive interview yesterday with the deputy president. By today, we know what the viewers felt about that interview. Not even by today, yesterday, by the time we were going to bed, we knew. We were able to look at all the messages and have a general idea of what they liked and maybe what they did not like, if anything. It's an interview I enjoyed. I was up until 12 past midnight watching it. Nevertheless, so that is one. Social media, both an ally, but also a competitor. And then also the media space is facing its challenges. There's a greater challenge of resources across media houses. So maybe in the past, there were greater resources to do a lot more. And nowadays, you know that media houses are competing with social media companies and all that. So generally, across the world, media houses are cutting budgets. Media houses are retrenching, from the Washington Post to BuzzFeed to, I think even the BBC and closer home, the stories. So that is a challenge for any broadcast journalist. They are working in an uncertain environment with fewer resources. And the challenge with fewer resources is, like for the Kenyan space, is that after a while, seasoned journalists jump ship because they feel that maybe their pay, perks, or working conditions will not allow them to retire, for example. I've had that argument. So a lot of journalists eventually become PR practitioners. Some go to become political advisors because they feel they'll get more money there. Whereas, when I was at the BBC, one of the interesting things I observed was how many people were there who were in their 60s, Man, someone is in their 60s and still voicing scripts, still writing scripts, still in the newsroom. I found that very interesting. Here in Kenya, if you're in your 60s in the newsroom, you better be a very senior manager, or you can't be on the desk, you can't be on duty. It's very rare to see that. And so those are the challenges. I think the other challenge is just the changing nature of journalism. As I mentioned, if you are brought up with the sort of traditional journalism techniques, and then you are now told data journalism is the way to go, man, you need to go back to school. You need to upgrade your skills. And I don't know how many journalists are willing to do that. You have been so used to doing things in a certain way, but now you have to change because the market is changing. The cheese has moved and you need to move with it.
Wow, that's a very comprehensive answer. No, I'm thinking, do you think that schools right now, media schools and institutions and universities, they should at least try and change how they teach in order for the students coming up as the new journalists to be able to be at par with the changing trends?
I can say yes and no. I believe there are already several media schools across the country who have started adapting to these changes. And the school experience can never quite be like the newsroom experience. As much as you try, there will be some differences. But nevertheless, yes, I think all media schools must now take data journalism very seriously. When I look at job adverts in the last 4 months, I've seen more job adverts for data journalists than I have seen for ordinary reporters or editors or that sort of thing. And so, especially for sort of new players in the field, if you have some data journalism skills, I almost believe it will be easier for you to get into the door of a media house. And by media house, I don't just mean KTN, Citizen, NTV. I mean even Africa Check. I mean Pesa Check. Those are media organizations just operating slightly differently. BBC fact checking. Where journalists, you're not out there, interviewing Raya and that sort of thing. You are looking at when fact checking, for example, you're looking at things that are being peddled out there as facts, and you are analyzing them to assess the truth of around them or not. Those ones are hiring even more than I think traditional media houses are. And so I would say, yes, media houses, media schools, change your techniques, upgrade, keep getting better, speak to the industry veterans, understand exactly what is happening out there.
And the last question is, there's a lot of worry, especially for media students and also young journalists, in the trend that you normally see, because there's this, like you see right now, the comedians there's so many comedians on the radio, and then people wonder if these comedians are given space on radio, then how about us who are still studying? Is there going to be an opportunity for us? So maybe the thing would be, what would be your parting shot, or maybe your advice for students who are doing these calls?
Yeah, good question. It's a difficult one. If I answer, I might get stoned by the public if this was ever to leak. But this is how somebody put it. When the cheese moves, you can either complain about why the cheese is moving. So, for example, this discussion around comedians on radio, let me tell you, I joined media 11 years ago. People were still discussing it and complaining. One group was complaining, one group was supporting. What that tells me is it doesn't look like it's going to change. That's the way I see it. Okay, either media owners have decided that that's the way to go, and the numbers reflect it. Remember, a media responds to these people, okay, these comedians. And so we can spend a lot of time discussing the pros and cons. And obviously, there are more cons to having untrained comedians. I mean, you saw what happened the other day with Homeboys, and I in no way sort of support that. But I also say, if I was a journalism student, I wouldn't focus too much on who's already sitting in those seats doing morning radio. Rather, I would ask myself, where is this industry going? Now, I don't have all the answers for them, but one way I have seen where it's going is this data journalism way. And so I would tell myself, in addition to ensuring that I can edit and I can script and I can read a good voice for English or Kiswahili and that sort of thing, can I also figure out where this data journalism is being taught so that I sit for that course, even if it's a 6-month course or a 3-month course, so that by the time I'm done, I can either be employed by a traditional media house to be a reporter or that sort of thing, or I can be employed by one of these new institutions. And by new, I mean some of them are startups, but they're looking for people with those skills. I'm talking about Africa Uncensored, run by my friend John Alanamu. The other day I saw them looking for a project manager. So you can see now journalism now requires project managers. I'm talking about my friend Asha Mwilu, who has, I believe, a data journalist or 2 within her team. When there are vacancies, Asha Mwilu is with Debunk Media, and there are many other media institutions that are popping up. I mentioned the Africa Check, the PESA Check, and that sort of thing. They are not looking for your traditional journalist. So I would say you do your degree because they will give you the traditional skills that you need, the long-term, the old school storytelling, etc., which haven't changed from like the 1950s, but also understand what's happening with tech and journalism. So that's what I would say. Do we need more trained journalists on radio? Yes. Do we need, I mean, when you listen to the BBC, by and large, a lot of their shows come with information that help you sort of for better living. I don't know why that model hasn't worked in Kenya. I would love to have a time when, you don't necessarily have to play music to keep audiences tuned in. I also wonder, because the BBC plays to a global audience, can they then just do news for 3 hours and it's acceptable? But I would also like to listen to a local UK TV radio station. I'm sure they play music. I'm sure they have comedians. I'm sure they talk gossip. So I think the target market for Kenyan radio stations has, by and large, determined the content. But there's still a lot out there. I wouldn't claim to be the expert in this. I'm also internally trying to process what's the best way forward. But I agree with the directive by the CEO of Kenya Film Classification Board that all media practitioners should undergo some sort of training, whether a internal training by a media house before they begin, or even one organized by the Media Council.